Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tool Time Podcast. I'm Nadine Vita.
And I'm Eric Garba.
And I'm Chris Springer with SATA USA, the National Accounts and Industry Relations Manager.
Chris, thank you so much for being in the studio with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This is actually new for me and Eric and I. We've never had a guest in the studio join us, so we're really excited.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
Nice.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
I know there comes some nerves with video podcasts, but please don't be nervous. We're very excited, and it looks like we've got a great list of topics to cover, so are you guys ready to get started?
Sure.
We're ready.
Let's do it.
So, Chris, explain the primary differences between a gravity, pressure, or siphon-fed spray gun, and do those differences make them more suited to specific industries?
That's a great question, a great lead-in. I would say siphon feed spray guns is kind of where we started in years past. Technically, if you look at any of the current modern, we market them as a gravity feed spray gun, meaning the cup is on top, gravity helps assist the fluid. It's still a siphon feed spray gun. Okay. It's just the cup is on top now. There's a vacuum that's created by the air cap and fluid tip that helps draw material out.
Okay.
So the reason I bring that up and how that's relative is a siphon feed gun, it was essentially like a straw going down off the bottom of the gun into a cup that held your paint. And as you may tip that gun to spray a horizontal panel or as it starts getting empty, it's like when you get to the bottom of a drink, you know, and you're kind of shaking it and trying to get the drink to the bottom corners of the straw.
Yeah.
So it'll spit and sputter.
Okay.
So not only was there a reason to move the cup to the top, just so that as the paint material runs out, once it's out, it's gone. It just shuts off. It's also an ergonomics thing. Instead of all that weight being down at the bottom and you forcing your wrist over to do a horizontal, it makes it a little bit more balanced.
Okay.
So you've got the hose off the bottom of the gun, you've got a cup of material on top. It makes it nice and balanced and less, more ergonomic for the painter. How the siphoning effect or the vacuum on both siphon and gravity feed spray guns is relative to pressure pots or pressure guns is a pressure gun, whether it's delivered from a pressure pot or a pump, the material delivery rate is dictated by the pressure that's put into the pot or the pump, where the material rate that's on a siphon feed or gravity feed spray gun is determined by your inlet pressure and how much vacuum is created. So there's not an exact crossover of fluid tips between, say, a gravity feed spray gun and a pressure spray gun. Pressure spray guns are typically a smaller fluid tip. Say if I have a 1.3 in a gravity feed, I would probably have a 1.1 or a 1.0 in a pressure pot or a pump scenario. Typically, we see those types of guns in like manufacturing or industrial accounts, right?
Okay.
They could be painting ships. They could a very popular area for us, and with that equipment is Elkhart, Indiana, right? It's the heart of where most motorhome manufacturing takes place.
Oh, yeah.
So these guys are, they'll mix up a 5-gallon pressure pot or pump with paint rather than constantly refilling your cup on a gravity feed spray gun on a 53-foot trailer.
Right.
That gives them that option of just fill it once and now we can paint this whole thing.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's perfect. I guess it's kind of like painting your house with a pressure painter. You put the 5-gallon bucket under there, and you're done with something that big.
That's exactly it. It's very similar. That's an airless system. Just because we're talking about it, we have an air-assisted airless.
Okay.
That's that cat eye type of fluid tip. So you get your pattern shaping and atomization purely from the pressure of pushing fluid through a cat-eyed shape.
Okay.
We have an air-assisted airless, meaning for house paint, it's perfect with an airless system. But you might get into industrial or wood coatings where that gives an okay finish, but the introduction of air just to kind of take the atomization to that next step of fineness, that's where that comes in.
Okay. Awesome. And that's a great point about the ergonomics too. I really didn't think about that at all.
Me either.
If you do it as you did for many, many years,
Yeah.
That weight could make a big difference on how your wrist feels and all that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and those guys and girls that are painting those motorhomes over in Elkhart, I literally mean they've got 3-foot drywall stilts on. They've got full fresh air systems. They've got their paint gun with hoses, and they're in there for 8-9 hours. right? They
Wow,
might get
that's
a break, for lunch and a couple breaks or as they're changing colors or refilling products, but ergonomics and
yeah.
it's almost like the military adage of ounces equals pounds, pounds equals pain, right? So
Right,
you want to
right.
make things light and ergonomic for the technician so that they don't get gassed out as quick.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. You mentioned briefly disposable cup systems, and those seem to be very popular today. Can you give a reasoning why you believe they are so popular right now?
When they came out with SATA, we introduced the RPS cup in 2005. And when it was released, at that time, there wasn't a lot of disposable cup options. And really what the driving force behind it was, just like this cup here. If this is on top of my gun and I fill this with paint, then when I'm finished, even if I pour out the residue that's in the cup, it's still fully coated. So now our old processes was typically a couple pumps of thinner into the cup, put the lid on, shake that up, pour that into the waste drum, then we start cleaning the spray gun. Now with a disposable cup system, right, that attaches to the top of the gun, it's basically I'm cleaning from here out the front of the gun. Wow. So instead of a normal cleaning job taking, it depends on how efficient you are, but it could take a half pint up to a pint of thinner to clean a spray gun. Now I can do it in an ounce, ounce and a half.
Okay.
So it really cut down the waste stream and just kind of being
more conscious. I'm sure on costs as well, yeah.
Well, and there is some cost, and nobody, in years past, nobody really considered that because you're not only paying for the paint,
right,
but then you're using what you do use, and everything, all the paint that you purchased that you put into a waste drum, now you pay someone again to come and dispose of that, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So you're paying almost twice for some of the products in a sense, right? As a way of looking at it, and there's a cost associated with that. So instead of the shop I was in, it was about once a month, maybe a month and a half, we would fill a 55-gallon drum of waste.
Wow.
I mean, I'm dating myself, but that's back in the 90s, right? And then as these cup systems came out, now they're seeing, now we're only generating 2, maybe 3 drums per year because we've cut down on our waste. So not only does it cut down on waste, expense, though there's an expense and cost to the disposable cup systems, there is a cost to use them, but it almost in every scenario, it outweighs the cost of all the waste and the disposal fees.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. Sounds like a great way to save money and ultimately good for the environment.
Absolutely.
Too, right?
It sounds like you guys are considering all angles in the industry, which is super important right now.
Absolutely. So, Chris, can you talk about the difference between an RP and a HVLP spray gun and maybe why you would choose one over the other?
Sure. And we'll start with, HVLP stands for high volume, low pressure. Some people don't know what that is referencing. It's referencing a high volume of air at a lower pressure.
Okay.
Lower pressure relative to what? Well, it's relative to old conventional style spray guns. And then in our world, we call them RPs, but there is a category of compliant spray gun, which we'll get into in a little bit when we talk about 6H compliance and whatnot as far as HVLP and RP and what's required from a technician. But there is an HVLP rule that went into place, I want to say in 1999, don't quote me on it, but it's around that area when national rule for VOC regulations came into effect. And how that rule is stated is a spray gun that is categorized as HVLP cannot exceed 10 pounds at the air cap. So what that means as a manufacturer is we will drill and tap the center of an air cap as well as the air horn and put gauges on there so that we can prove to the EPA and South Coast that with our maximum inlet pressure of 29, we don't exceed 10 pounds at the air cap.
Okay.
The logic behind that, or the theory behind that, is if we don't exceed 10 at the air cap, anything over 10, you're hitting the paint with more air, you're driving more into the air and creating more, waste that's going into your filters and, potentially into the environment. So it's kind of a way of capping the equipment from a pressure standpoint. There is another side to that rule where you have to be within compliance of one or the other. So 10 pounds at the air cap or 65% transfer efficiency or greater. So an RP gun, which stands for reduced pressure in our world, falls under the 65% or greater transfer efficiency because it is in excess of 10 pounds at the cap. That then requires us to get third-party testing where we send our guns to a third-party, non-biased company. They do an evaluation of the equipment on its transfer efficiency capabilities, and they do that with two of the most popular brands of paints that are in the industry. So they're using the same products that we use here in the US and Canada to test the spray guns. They measure the amount of transfer efficiency that they get. And what I mean by transfer efficiency, just to elaborate for some that are listening to this, that's meaning how much of the paint is coming out of the front of the gun goes to the panel and stays.
Okay.
So if 10 ounces comes out of the front of the gun, 6.5 better be on the panel.
Okay.
So that's 65% or greater. We're far in excess of 65%. We don't like to ride that line very close. We're well over that in our transfer efficiency. And then once you get that third-party testing, those results get submitted to South Coast Air Quality Management District in California. They go over those results and they issue us a compliancy letter, and then that letter is delivered to the US EPA. The EPA then issues us a letter saying that this equipment is within compliance, and that then kind of green lights us to sell it into the US and Canada markets.
Okay.
For any of your Canadian listeners, there's not necessarily a 6H rule there, but they follow what rules the US puts in place for regulatory. They have their own VOC rules, but from an equipment standpoint, they kind of just say they've checked all the boxes, then it's okay to distribute up here.
I know it's definitely reassuring for our audience to hear that the equipment goes under a lot of testing to make sure that it's, ready to hit the shelves essentially. Now, with today's advanced coatings like waterborne and UV primer technology, has it changed the way that you guys design these spray guns?
A little bit. It's not necessarily a major change. At least from the SATA side of things, our needles and fluid tips have been manufactured out of stainless the entire time. From a gun body perspective, a lot of gun bodies back in the early 2000s were chrome. Even all the way up to 2010, they were chrome gun bodies. As the legislation in the US in some areas, right, California, Maryland, different areas where they've gone to waterborne coatings where it was more forced than a choice, they had to look at all kinds of things. They had to look at separate waste streams for solvent and water. On the gun side of things, we wanted to ensure that whether you're spraying a solvent-borne clear coat or a waterborne primer or a waterborne base coat, that the gun is not intelligent. It doesn't know what product is being put through it. It needs to be able to do all of those. So we've really gone over to an anodized finish. So it's anodized in and out, all throughout. And then with the stainless steel fluid tip and needle, really, whether you're spraying water or solvent, nothing affects the spray gun.
Okay.
Excellent.
That's awesome. Yeah, so it's really an advantage
I mean,
for a
just
refinish
looking at
technician.
them, they look like they're,
yeah.
Made out of great quality. They look not flimsy at all. Just having them here in the studio, that's fantastic for sure.
Yeah. And honestly, if you look close enough, you'll notice on some of these are my demo guns that I go out and do, training and demos in shops. Switching from the chrome to the anodized, being anodized throughout the entire throat of the gun where the paint flows, they clean up so easy now that you can make your investment in a tool and it's going to last a long time.
Love that.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. And it sounds like works with all these different types of paint and coatings. You don't have to buy multiple guns. You've got one gun that gets the job done for everything.
And even on that UV side, just to expand a little bit on it, one of the things that we offer in our disposable cup system is a UV cup. It's nothing, I don't want to say overly fancy. It's just a black cup that does not allow light to transfer through it. So we've got an entire UV line. We have a UV primer gun that's developed to spray those coatings. Nothing special about the gun. It's more in the fluid tip and the way that it atomizes.
Okay.
Because those products aren't 100% clear. They're more of a translucent coating so that the light will penetrate all the way through and cure the coating. So a lot of people's traditional primer guns, if they pick them up and spray UV primers with them, they end up having a tendency to put too much material on,
Okay.
and then you don't get a through cure. So we have a UV setup for our spray gun. We even have, let me grab one of these. We have a black version of this that has no hole that, let's say UV products don't require a hardener. So I shake it up, I put it into a cup, put the lid on, put the cup on my gun. Now when I spray, that repair area, I'm gonna have a little drip right on the needle and the fluid tip, right where the needle shut off. If I just hang this gun up in the shop, just that ambient light could cure that.
Right.
Okay.
So now the next time I go to spray, that either becomes a piece of trash in what I'm spraying, or it could cause an error or a flaw in the spray gun.
Wow.
So we can take our black cap, put it over the end of the gun. That keeps that from curing in between coats, and then you just take it off and spray. And that black cup, not being able to be penetrated by light, gives us the advantage of you can have that cup out in the shop hanging all day
Okay.
and not need to remix. You just need to refill. If I do this primer job, we cure it, and then I don't have another one for a couple hours, it's okay.
That's fantastic.
This is really interesting.
Absolutely.
this
We're
is
starting
great
off
stuff.
strong.
Yeah, I know.
Great stuff,
This is
Chris.
great.
We really appreciate it.
So you mentioned a primer gun. Now, do you have a gun specifically that you recommend for primer and maybe small repairs?
Yeah, we actually have multiple categories of guns. Just starting off, we've got automotive and industrial. The only type of spray equipment that we don't deal with would be airless, electrostatic, or like Bell applications, something that would be more driven towards OEM. But we do have anything that's just air atomized technology. We've got an industrial line where we have both gravity and pressure guns. But then on the automotive side, which is probably our more relevant side to everyone listening to this, we have a few different categories of primer guns, or what we would call undercoat guns, because we would put etch primers, zinc-rich primers, wash primers, regular primer surfacers, sealers. We put all of those in an undercoats category.
Okay.
Then we have base coat, clear coat, single stage guns, or our top coat guns, as well as we have what we've got here is a couple of our mini jets, which would be our touch-up guns. But over the years, we've gone from a touch-up gun being exactly that. It's made for touch-ups for very small spots. They never had much more than a 4 or 5 inch pattern on them, to where we're at today, where I almost call this gun an 80% gun. Because if, say, my full-size gun has a 10-inch pattern, just for math's sake, let's use a 10-inch pattern, I call this an 8-inch pattern. Right?
Okay.
It's not quite as big as your full-size gun as far as the pattern or the gun,
Okay.
but it has all the performance of a top coat gun
Okay.
or a full-size gun. So the nice thing is the versatility about it's the 4400 is our mini jet. It's available in both HVLP and RP. Everything that we do is available in both HVLP and RP.
Awesome.
But it can go from bare metal all the way through clear coat. One of the things that we do, or a demonstration that I do quite frequently, is priming with a mini jet. And the nice thing is the efficiency of the gun, the low overspray of the gun. Priming typically in the US isn't done in a booth. It's out on a shop floor, maybe a prep deck if you're lucky.
Okay.
Having that low overspray, when I was priming cars, it was, I'm going to use 36-inch masking paper, and then I'm going to put plastic over this car, and I'm going to put plastic over the car that's behind it, because the gun that I'm using is going to have overspray traveling everywhere. The nice thing about the mini jet is I can really, and I genuinely mean this, I could get away with 6-inch paper, but I always teach it as 12-inch.
Okay.
Because my overspray is not traveling. The overspray that does travel, because it's so low and soft in its application, and low, I mean sound and air pressure, even though it's 29 pounds going into it, It's not very turbulent. The paint transfers to the panel and stays there. And what little bit of overspray does float past beyond the panel, it's dry before it even gets to the paper.
Wow.
So a lot of times the demo I do is I don't even mask off an area.
Really?
I just have a spot repair. I go in, I show them priming with a mini jet, and then they'll see overspray out over here, and I just take my hand and wipe it with a glove on and show them, look, the overspray just comes right off the panel. It's not wet.
Okay.
It didn't hit it wet.
Okay.
It's not sticking and
Wow.
causing you more work later. So yeah, we do have that undercoats category, and our primer gun is our Jet 100 line.
Okay.
We have an HVLP, an RP, and then we also have a polyester gun. Sprayable polyesters are, they always kind of pop their head up like every 5-10 years where they become popular again. Very similar to UV primer and
Okay.
and waterborne coatings for that matter. But with that polyester gun, it's got shorter air horns. They're actually shaved back a little bit because anybody that sprays polyesters knows that you'll start getting air horn buildup. Just the overspray will push some of it to it and it'll start changing your pattern shape. So we shave those back to avoid that, and it has a 2.5 fluid tip in it. A lot of times it's a shock when I show it to technicians because they look at that fluid tip and I'm like, you could spray a peanut butter sandwich with that if you wanted. Like it's big enough that it would flow. But yeah, it's a great question because there are guns that are made for specific, layers of the coatings.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, now I'm kind of
Absolutely.
hungry talking about
Yeah.
peanut butter sandwich.
I was just about to say, now I just
butter
pictured
sandwiches,
myself
yeah.
spraying a peanut butter sandwich. I'm very intrigued, honestly. That's really cool, to hear about the overspray not affecting and not having to, tape up, that little area. That's very
It's just
interesting.
so much information.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great stuff.
I really like
Makes me
it.
want to start painting something right now.
Right.
It's awesome.
So what effect have EPA 6H regulations have on the industry so far?
So when 6H went into effect, it made some people nervous, but it was just checking some boxes of, regulatory and not being wasteful and environmentally friendly mindset. It was just really putting it on paper of where somebody needs to be within compliance. So it touches on everything from spray booth filters and their efficiency, how much overspray that goes into those filters has to be captured. Right. They don't want the overspray just heading out into the air and into the environment. It covers gun washers and where to clean your guns, how to clean your guns, waste streams, as far as your drums. From the spray gun side of things, mostly because we were all ahead of the curve on technology. The HVLP and RP ruling, what 6H did that was good was there was areas like the Chicago area where it was HVLP only. They didn't want to look at or regulate a compliant gun or RP in our world, and what it did was it lifted that veil off of Chicago. It made it a nationwide rule. It can be HVLP or RP as long as RP falls within this compliance, right? Okay. And we have that EPA certificate. But from that standpoint, it really, like I say, was just regulations that we were all, for the most part, following, but it was just putting it down on paper.
Okay. Now, do technicians and shop owners need to do anything to make sure that they're in compliance with these regulations?
And that's a great follow-up question to that. With 6H, say I hire you tomorrow, and unfortunately a week later, an EPA or OSHA employee comes in and has to do an audit, or they're coming in to check. Mm-hmm. I have, as an employer, 90 days. I believe it might even be up to 180 days to get you trained and certified as a new technician. Okay. And then that certification lasts for 5 years. So we at SATA USA do offer 6H. So we have reps around the country as well as us direct employees where we can come and we'll hold a 6H class where we'll bring in a bunch of technicians. We run you through the required curriculum from 6H that we have to have approved by the government. We run through that. There's a very short, easy, not to be afraid of test at the end. Every time I tell a technician there's a test at the end, they're like, are you kidding me? Who invited this guy? But there's just a quick 4-question test. really covering exactly what we've bullet pointed throughout the presentation. And then there's a hands-on portion that talks about gun angle, distance from the panel, overlap, that when you get to the end of a panel, you should trigger off rather than just holding the trigger and then coming back, because then you're just throwing paint into your filters.
Right.
So once the technician goes through that class, they receive a certificate, whether it's from us or a paint company. They'll receive a certificate, and a copy of that should be on file at their employer. So if they ever come in, they're going to ask for the technicians that are painters or that are applying coatings.
Okay.
Are they certified, and can we see their certificates?
Okay.
And it should be a fairly easy thing.
Yeah.
I try to tell technicians, I jokingly say it, but it's quite honestly a good piece of advice. Always give your employer a copy, because as a painter, I can say that, like, I'm the best.
Right.
And I say that tongue in cheek, but we have jumped ship from one shop to another one before, sometimes on good terms, sometimes on bad.
Right.
Yeah.
And the worst thing to do is leave on bad and then have to call the office the next day and say, hey, could I get my certificate back?
Right. Yeah. That's their,
I need that for the new shop I'm at. Yeah, exactly. So, and we keep it on file. That's part of our compliancy, where I keep the test questions, the registration forms, and I have the technicians that I've certified.
That's awesome.
So we keep that on file as well. They could always reach out to us, but it's just good advice.
For
give
sure.
them a copy.
Great
and keep
advice.
the
Great advice, but a great offering. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to hear that SATA can help technicians with this compliance. And along those lines, we didn't get a chance yet to talk about a little history of SATA.
Yeah.
Sure.
Did we hear a little name change?
There might be one, yeah.
Ooh, tell us a little bit about that.
So SATA itself has been in business over 100 years. They celebrated 111th quite a few years back. And I can say that all the way back to patent number 1, we were a gravity feed spray gun. In 1925, we actually were gravity feed. So focusing with a cup on top and that flowing, it's just German engineering, right? It's some of the finest. But with that, in the U.S., Dan Am Company has been the exclusive independent distributor of SATA for, honestly, the U.S. and Puerto Rico for the last 40 years. It's been a family-owned business. It was named Dan Am because the family was from Denmark. They came over to a very Danish-populated area.
Okay.
Danish-American was Dan
cool.
Am. So that's really where that came from. They had a brilliant outlook on things. They picked the center of the country, which is in southern Minnesota. Kind of some of the logic, other than the community there, was we can ship to both coasts and south within 2 to 3 days. So a very forward-thinking, business-minded family.
Okay.
Who did a tremendous job of representing the brand for the last 40 years. But like you said, the little rumors that have been rumbling around, and as of March 1st, we are officially SATA USA Incorporated.
Excited.
Awesome. Very cool.
So now we're, the way I like to say it is, now we're attached to the mothership of SATA Germany.
Yes.
But now, yes, we're a direct offshoot of SATA Germany, or a subsidiary of SATA Germany. We still do the importing. It's still all the same employees. So all of that legacy knowledge and information of those last 40 years, I've been with them. This is my 9th year.
Okay.
But all of that information, all the people that you've been dealing with on a regular basis, you're still going to see those familiar faces and that knowledge that you've relied on as technicians and everybody out in the field. We're still going to be here.
I love it.
That is
Very
awesome.
exciting.
Yeah, that is.
Sometimes name changes are okay and needed. We used to be Babcock's Publications. Now we're Babcock's Media.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
there you go.
Yeah, very exciting.
And then we'll finish you off with this, Chris. Many people may automatically think spray gun when they hear the name SATA, but are there additional products you offer that painters and body shops can benefit from?
So I like that you asked it that way, of the association of SATA is spray guns, right? And that is just purely built off of that reputation of that's where they started and are continuing to be the world leader at. But the things that we offer that a lot of people may not know is really, if you take a building and you put a compressor and a spray booth, I can fill in the gaps all the way from the compressor to the spray booth. We have a brand that will stay with our company is Dan Am Air. It's our extruded aluminum piping system that we have.
Okay.
That's extremely clean, easy to install, and in almost every scenario, especially over copper, other piping and black pipe or galvanized pipe that you're putting in your shop, that's heavy. You're dealing with, you've either got to cut threads, which, in a paint shop, it's one thing for somebody to come and install piping at an automotive engine shop. But a paint shop, we're very affected by silicones and oils where they cause contamination and issues with paint. So when they come in and they start installing the piping, they're cutting this steel pipe with oil.
Right,
and then most of those guys will leave this body shop and go to, Discount Tire or somewhere else where their relevancy of, oh, I need to clean this pipe off before I install it. I can't tell you how many times I've had shops where they have craters and fisheye issues. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you, but your piping's contaminated.
Oh, okay.
We can put filtration, but until all of that oil makes its way downstream and gets caught in a filter, you're going to have these issues. So the nice thing with the piping, right, is it's easy to install, it's fast, it's clean. We go into filtration. So we have not only filtration for taking out contaminants and things that are going to cause issues with paint, but we have a third leg that can be put on that, or it can come as a 3-stage filter from the get-go, which converts that air to grade D breathable air. So we can take compressed air, run it through our filter system, and then coming out on the other side, that's air that a technician can breathe inside the spray booth.
Okay,
So
wow.
rather than using a respirator, right? I've got a beard. I've tried to grow one since the day I could. And the issue with that is a respirator fit test, right?
Okay.
I don't get a good seal on my face because of my hair. So wearing fresh air not only ensures that I'm not breathing in any of those harmful chemicals, but it's also not sneaking in and I'm not absorbing it into my eyes and sinuses.
Okay. Yeah.
So we offer the filtration. Naturally, with breathing able filtration, we have a couple breathing hoods, our Vision 2000 and Vision 5000 line, which is our hoods that can be worn that plug into that compressed air and give you supplied air. We have, obviously, our spray guns. We have paint suits. Something that we're very proud of is how many women are getting into this industry. So I think we're the only ones that have come out with a women's paint suit, which, it sounds maybe a little silly to the average person, but we're built differently.
I was just about to say, absolutely.
Yeah.
Our frames are very different.
Yeah,
definitely.
and I talk to how many girls that are painters, and they're like, I hate the paint suit. The crotch of the paint suit is halfway down to my knees. So we built one that's a little bit more female structure in all the sizes, right? From extra small to XXX.
Something I noticed too in the industry that a lot of the stuff, because it's made for, men, is that it's made very straight, where a lot of women can be even more curvier, so that I even struggle with that. Like if I'm wearing a shop shirt for a video here in the studio, I gotta size up if it's men's because I'm a curvier girl. So that's fantastic to hear that you guys are tailoring to that side of the industry as well.
And so we do the paint suits. We even did a lady edition mini jet. That was our second time doing one of those because it became so popular. Being a smaller gun, ladies typically have a smaller hand.
Yes.
It's a good touch-up gun for them to get. Not that they're going to get away from a full-size gun.
Right.
But it's just something just to continue that welcoming into the industry. We get into dryers for waterborne coatings. We have an air amplifier that does waterborne coatings. We have a color match light that it's the best color match light in the industry, is our True Sun. Meaning from color accuracy to the spectrum of light that it gives represents all waves of visible light. It's 5600K, so it's a very white light. A lot of people want very intense lights, and they get up into 6,000 and above. And what happens is when you get up into that strength of light, it starts going blue. So where that comes into play is when evaluating colors, right? There's a phenomenon called metamerism. And metamerism is where you paint a car and it looks great, and you've got a blend on the side, and then you go park it at a gas station. or Walmart parking lot. I'm sure we've all been there, right?
yeah.
You're driving through the Walmart
Absolutely.
parking lot and you see like that obvious door that is not the
Yeah.
right
Right,
color,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That could be a metameric phenomenon that takes place where a color can appear to be different under different light sources.
Okay.
So that's why, a color match light is something that we get a little complacent about, because as long as we've got light, it's got to be good because we can at least see what we're doing. But having a good color correct light, that's important from a color match and what that vehicle is going to look like when it gets out of your
Absolutely.
shop,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Absolutely.
Because there's different light sources.
cool.
There's halogen, there's fluorescent, there's sodium lights.
Mm-hmm.
They all put off different strengths of wavelengths, right?
Right.
The ones at Walmart's are very high in yellow.
Okay.
And that's why most likely gold metallics and colors that contain yellow are the ones that look the worst in those parking lots.
Oh, okay. Very
Because it
interesting.
brings that color out,
Yeah.
right?
That's so
Yeah.
true, though.
So yeah, we like to be a company that's beyond spray
Yes.
guns, right? We want to be able to do everything from piping, filtration, hoses, couplers, fittings, spray guns, paint suits, fresh air helmets, color match lights, dryers. We do get into pumps. We do get into pressure pots. We have so many things in our catalog that it would be almost impossible for me to list them all.
Right. Well, maybe we'll save it for the next
Maybe,
podcast.
you never know, right?
Well, Chris, this was a fantastic conversation. Seriously, you brought a lot of knowledge to the table, and I learned a lot. It's very interesting to hear that, how much testing and regulation goes and for all of these pieces and what you guys are doing to cater to the entire industry, whether it be older folks or, newer techs. And now we just mentioned female techs. So really, really great conversation. Did you want to add anything,
Oh,
Eric?
absolutely. Yeah, just a fantastic conversation. I learned so much. Like we said, I mean, I'm ready to go out and try my hand at painting a car. I mean, it's just fantastic information. It's exciting to learn all this technology that goes into this, and it makes you feel successal before you even grab the paint gun. Yeah.
That's great.
Absolutely.
And-
Absolutely.
And thank you for this opportunity, right? It is something I'm passionate about. Paint is my whole life. I was on the paint company side of things for almost 19 years, and now I've been on the equipment side for so long. This is what I enjoy. It's what I enjoy talking about, and having a receptive audience is
Absolutely.
nice
Oh,
because
absolutely.
it's important stuff. And the more you know, I always tell technicians, never stop learning. The day you stop
Absolutely.
learning, you're going to
Absolutely.
find out real fast how quickly you get obsoleted.
Yep. that's
Because
for sure.
things change too fast, right? In this
Absolutely.
industry.
Yeah.
So
That's
keep
perfect.
learning and stay strong. Use SATA.
All right.
Love it.
Thanks again,
Love
Chris.
it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in today to the Tool Time Podcast. Be sure to keep your eye out for the next episode. See you later.